Hey everybody, it's Monday morning. It's kind of a rainy morning in Texas. It's going to get cold, I guess, later this week. I wanted to go over the week 3 module, just to orient you about what you're going to be for this week and be quizzed on next week. The first thing I want to say is that your reading this week, you might remember that I waived the reading in the second half, I think, of chapter 5 of Gwen for last week, and I'm going to have you read it this week and test you on it next week. That reading is on the attack on San Saba, the San Saba mission north and west of San Antonio in the 1750s, in the ultimate peace treaty that the Spanish and the Comanche arrived at in 1785. Now, I lectured on that in the third podcast last week. You might want to review that podcast to your podcast notes, but you'll be reading that section on Gwen about the attack on San Saba and the consequences of that, and you'll be tested on it for next week. That's a great example of two things. First of all, the specific, this very, very interesting, I think, attack on the San Saba mission, the destruction of it, the fact that the Apaches had tricked the Spanish into creating a mission to protect them from the Comanche. So it shows us a couple of things. It shows how the Comanche dominate the Apache. They come in from the northwest and they push the Comanche come in from New Mexico into northwest Texas, and they pull the Little Pond Apache, or they push the Little Pond Apache to the area of South Texas around San Antonio because they're much stronger than the Apache. So that tells us something important about native relations and native diplomacy in Texas. It also tells us that the Indians are smart. They know how to manipulate the Spanish. It also tells us that the Comanche in Texas are far more powerful than the Spanish in Texas, far more powerful than the Spanish in Spanish Texas. The Comanche, like Wynn says, they rendered the Spanish almost irrelevant. They could have destroyed San Antonio in an afternoon if they wanted to, but luckily for the Spanish, San Antonio was outside the Comancheria. The other thing about San Saba, which is important, is that the Comanche stopped the Spanish from going any further north and west in their Texas possession. And again, we don't think about the Indians the native groups being able to stop European groups from doing what they wanted, but in Texas, the Comanche basically at San Saba told the Spanish, no more. You're not going any further. You can't come into the Comancheria. This is our land. So I want you just to realize that by the 1750s, the Comanche have an empire, a rival empire in North America that first of all rivals the Spanish, then Mexico, and then the United States. We often don't think of other folks having, or other groups having, empires within what's now U.S. territory, but the Comanche most certainly did. Okay, so again, that is the second half of the Gwen reading, which I'll put on the announcement. I talked about it in the last podcast on last week for week 2, and you'll be tested on it. You'll be tested on it next week. I'll post a study guide on Gwen like I did last week. Now, to go over this module, the week 3 module, the first thing I'm going to want you to talk about, or I'm going to talk about, are the borders of Spanish Texas. The borders of Spanish Texas, I'll open this very briefly, are extremely different than the Texas that we think about today. So Texas is just this kind of green area on the map that goes from, I don't know, the Dallas area to a little bit south of San Antonio to the Nueces River, very significant. The Nueces River was the southern border of both Spanish and Mexican Texas, and to the coast. So when we think of Texas today, of course, we think of the beautiful shape of Texas today. But from the Spanish point of view, from the point of view of Mexico City, this was Texas, this green area on the map. And so I want you to realize that. And we'll talk about how Texas gains its shape over the course of the semester. Okay, so there's that. And there's another link that is from the Handbook of Texas, which talks about the Spanish missions. It gives you a little bit of a written detail about the Spanish missions. You don't have to read the whole thing. You only have to read it to the line, other Indians, both local and from elsewhere, had become part of the town itself. That's all you have to read. So you can do a keyword search on that and you can stop there, but you'll be tested in that little description of Spanish missions up to that point. There's this video that I found on YouTube. Of course, YouTube's amazing, as everybody knows. It's crazy, it's vile, it's entertaining, it's informative. But there's this nut, and I've never seen him before. He actually comes across as kind of an idiot, to be honest with you. But anyway, he hunts down the mysterious Tex-Mex food in Houston, as if Tex-Mex food is mysterious. Tex-Mex food's everywhere in 2022. You can go to Minneapolis, you can go to Paris and get Tex-Mex food. But anyway, I'm talking about Paris, France. Of course, you can get it in Paris, Texas. But it's a funny video. It's kind of this outsider encountering Tex-Mex food. And of course, that's something that all of us love is Tex-Mex food. Then the podcast stream for this week, along with the keywords that you should be alert for. Again, what I suggest is you print out these keywords. You have them beside you as you listen to the podcast. And if you know what each keyword is, if you know the dates, those are the facts that I'll be looking for in my quizzes. So I try to make it clear to you what it is you'll be tested on. So if you print out the keywords for the podcast, it kind of gives you, I would say, an outline, maybe is one way to think about it, of what you're going to encounter in the podcast. And anything that I put on the keyword in a podcast description, I feel quite comfortable in testing you on. Finally, I posted this beautiful image of the burning of San Saba, the destruction of San Saba. This painting comes from Mexico. It was actually in San Antonio in, gosh, was it 2017? The 300th, I guess that's been 2018. I should know this, I'm a historian. The 300th anniversary of the founding of San Antonio. It's a big painting. It was done by the brother. It was commissioned by the brother of one of the missionaries that was killed in the attack on San Saba. Take a look at it. You can see what the mission would have looked like. You can see how the colonial Mexicans, the Spanish colonial Mexicans, how they pictured Texas during this period. How the attack looked to them. There's a long description of the martyrs. Again, one of the priests that was killed in the San Saba mission destruction was the brother of the person that commissioned this painting. So this is actually one of the very, very few images we have of Spanish Texas. And I'm not sure it's accurate at all. In fact, the artist probably never came up here. It's his imaginary, as we say, of Spanish Texas, but it's worth a look, and it gives a sense of the sacrifice, or the sense of sacrifice of the missionaries. So just to repeat, I talked about the attack on San Saba in the 1750s. I talked about it in the last podcast of last week. You'll be reading about it in Gwyn for this week. And you'll be tested on it next week. And the final thing I'll say about that, Gwyn also talks about the attempt of the Spanish to punish the Comanche, the Norteño allies that destroyed San Saba. The Spanish raise a punitive party, and they come up to Texas to try to punish the folks that had destroyed the San Saba mission. You'll be tested on that part of Gwyn as well. Do the Spanish, are they able to succeed in punishing the Comanche that destroyed the San Saba mission? I'll give you a hint. No, they're not. The Comanche are stronger. But so don't blow that part of the Gwin story off, because ultimately what's going to happen is the Comanche decide that they can't defeat. I'm sorry, the Spanish decide that they can't defeat the Comanche, and by the 1780s they just decide to make peace with the Comanche, which is kind of the ultimate story in Texas.